Hi and welcome to RealClearFetish Talks RealClearPlay. It is a series of interviews or discussions between me and a guest. This week it's a little bit of a different time. It's at 11 in the morning here in London, but that's because we're going down under and we're having a guest from Australia on. So I had to get out of bed for this, so hopefully I don't look too groggy at this time in the morning. I don't normally get up at this early on a Saturday morning, so I hope this boy appreciates it. Should we add him in? I think so. One moment. I'll add him in. I need to get the glove off first. Where is he? There he is. Let me just find the collar and wrap it around his...
Oh, hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm talking to the future right now, which is interesting. How are you this evening?
Yes, I'm great. Yeah, I've just finished dinner, so it's 8 p.m. here in Brisbane.
Yeah, it's
And yes, I very much appreciate the fact that you've gotten out of bed for me this morning.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll be
You're the first man to ever get out of a bed for me.
Well, well, my bed is right there, so it's very easy for me.
It's a hop, skip, and a jump.
I literally just rolled out and just fell in front of the camera. It
I woke
works
up
pretty
like
well
this.
for me. As you know, we start with standardized 4 questions to start with, just to get the conversation going and just feel a little bit out. So the first one I'm going to go with is, what do you prefer I call you? Names, pronouns, and title.
Just call me B. Everybody does. And pronouns are he, him.
Cool.
And
So B, you say? Just B?
yeah,
Okay.
just B.
Just B.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm 38, originally from Sydney, but I live in Brisbane now. And a recent embarkation on a recovery journey. And yeah, so as you would have seen from Facebook, it's been quite a public journey for the last 12 months.
Yeah.
But yes, so that's kind of me at the moment. Yeah.
So, as you just mentioned that you are on recovery journey, so my next question is probably already answered itself a little bit. Completely sober, clear-headed, or sober, social drinker?
Completely sober.
Completely.
It's the only way that I can do it, because drinking is, yeah, it's a gateway drug.
I feel you there. One of the reasons, as a proud Danish person, drinking is very much a part of our culture, and one of the things I had to actually grieve a little bit about was giving up alcohol.
There is definitely a part of that. There's even a part of me that sometimes thinks, oh, I could just have a drink, and then I'm like, no. But I have discovered some really wonderful non-alcoholic drinks, like in the beer and wine range, and they are fantastic.
I think the biggest problem with non-alcoholic drinks is the price. It's just, it should be cheaper than non-alcoholic, but it's the same price and even more expensive, which is ridiculous. So, last question, which is going to lead us into our conversation, and we'll just see where we go. It's not scripted. It's not a certain theme. It's just what you want to bring to the table, or the webcam. What is ClearPlay to you, and why is it important?
For me, it's about 2 people being able to be on the same playing field, and being able to make those choices in an informed setting. I think I echo some of the other sentiments when it does actually come around to things like consent and things like that, and being able to engage with the negotiation of a scene and know that the decisions that you're making throughout are based on what you're feeling at the time.
Yeah.
Drugs tend to really cloud that, or you end up pushing yourself way too far because, yes, certainly I can take that really big, whatever it is that somebody wants to put in.
Take what big thing? Let's what? Oh.
That was a speaker, by the way, not a...
You have no idea what I'm just sitting on that at the moment, so...
Well, you're smiling, so I can have it. I can have it again.
Everything outside camera, you can't see anyway, so it's fine.
We don't want to get thrown off.
No, God, no. I've been very clear. That's like, let's keep it... Like, we talk about graphic stuff, but we have to, like, visually keep it clean. So... But it's you say you've been very like public about your recovery, especially online on Facebook and so on, and I've followed you a little bit. You came into my group a year ago now, would it be?
Yeah, it would have. Yes.
Yeah, and you've had your ups and downs in that year, and I've done what I can do here, being so far away. It's hard to physically do something, but lend an ear to whatever goes on with you.
You and your group have been an amazing support and an inspiration on my journey. I came into your group just before I made the decision to put everything down.
Yeah.
So by that stage, I already knew that, you know, it was a problem that I needed to address, but I hadn't actually got to that point of going, this is who I am. This is what I am. And I need to admit, you know, I'm an addict. And that for me was akin to the first time I ever admitted to myself that I was a masochist. And it's been really interesting drawing the parallels from the BDSM lifestyle and recovery, particularly around the principles of recovery and the principles of BDSM. There are so many matches, like the open-mindedness, honesty, willingness, surrender, like all of those things you can pull from
I've heard
both.
that before. I tend to tell that to my boys all the time. But yeah, it's some of the principles are the same, and that's why you do find a lot of people who are fetish men who are in recovery. It's a very strong recovery for a lot of people when they integrate that into their fetish life as well. You saw with Matthew last week, and he was so passionate.
That was so much fun to watch. I got so much from last week's one. It was incredible.
I'm glad you did. I was just feeling like a sweaty mess last week. Thank God we've had rain and thunder now. It's much more cooler today, so I feel wet.
It's raining here as well at the moment. So,
but you mentioned masochism and Serenity, and one of the things you are now launching is Serenity and Masochism. It was quite funny because I mentioned to a friend of mine. He kind of went, "That's a really interesting concept. I kind of like that idea," and he kind of got it. So can you tell a bit more about that? What is the goal with this?
To be honest, I'm still really fleshing that out. Like, for me, it was a reappropriation of my already existing blog, which I've just kind of clean slated and gone, okay, I'm going to... A lot of the posts were leather oriented, but now I want to really incorporate my recovery journey into that as well, and draw on those parallels and try and explore those themes in a lot more detail, but also looking at running some sober events here in Brisbane, you know, the Rona willing.
Well, everything permitted and social distance, and yeah, we're the same here. We're slowly kind of opening up. I think we just got news today that we might actually be able to rehearse with my chorus, which is
that would be amazing.
And we have like law firms who have like rooftop terraces where we can rehearse, so it's outside. So
well, we're up to like 50 people in a licensed venue now, so things are slowly getting back to some semblance of normal, but yeah, but one of the things that I am really looking at is filling that niche, because there's quite a lot of sober people, particularly on the gay scene, who are at least trying to live a cleaner lifestyle, and the scene tends to be very party oriented, very alcohol oriented.
Yeah.
So finding that way in where there is an alternative, I think is important.
It's as you say, you mentioned being quite public about it. It is, and that's one of my experiences as well, because I'm fairly public as well. I don't really shy away with an opinion, and I find, because I am quite not loud, but I'm a presence. I get people approaching me who are struggling, who needs a little bit of support, or just that like a couple of lines where they identify with something I've said or read or have written online, and they just like, oh God, that's me as well. I thought I was the only one, and that's so important.
I've had more than one person enter recovery because of just being open about it, and starting those conversations and being able to have people openly and honestly ask questions and know that I'm actually going to be able to give them an open and honest answer. Being transparent about it was more about myself, giving myself that accountability.
Yeah, I know that.
We all have that, what they call the gift of desperation. And that was kind of what threw me into making it as public as I did, was that willingness to go to any lengths to keep myself accountable and stay the path.
Yeah. It's easier to be the boy who cried wolf if you keep it to a slightly smaller group of people, but that smaller group of people will get annoyed with it very quickly.
Very quickly, especially when you're in and out, in and out, in and out.
Yeah, and that's where you lose people, and that's where you really test friendships. It's the people that stick around for all the drama. That's the people you need to keep close. That is really the people you need to keep close.
Yes, I have very much learned who my friends are through this process. And I did a lot of the am I, aren't I, that in and out cycle before I had actually gone public and gone, screw it, this is who I am, this is what I am, what do I do about it? I'd done that, trying to stop and falling off the wagon quite a bit. But when it comes to fetish in particular, I was really lucky. My sexual revolution, I guess, for myself started before picking up. Yeah. So I didn't lose that link altogether. It has changed somewhat.
Yeah, it changes. Yeah.
15 years of hardcore drug use will do that, I guess.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, did you find, like, when you gave it up, did you find, I know from personal experience, it took me a while to split it, because drugs kind of becomes a fetish in itself. And for someone who is, well, can I say, reasonable early recovery, it's still a learning process, I would guess, at this stage.
I'm still learning the ways in which my drug use has changed my attitudes towards sex. Yeah. Things become a lot more transactional, I guess. You have your list of needs and wants, and then you go and you jump on an app and you try and find somebody who meets that. For me, it's been a process of letting go of expectation and just being present in the moment, not going out and going, okay, I want it. You have to drop that I want.
The I is not important in this scenario. It's
no,
we can accomplish together as like two consenting adults, really.
Adults.
Yeah.
And also throwing away the script.
Trust me, and this is more my personal feeling is especially when I talk to boys online, and a lot of, like, of course, a lot of horniness comes into it, and you get all these ideas. You want to try this, you want to do this, and to be honest, as a sadist top, I find that slightly, I get anxious about that. Because all of a sudden it's like I have to perform, and I don't know how the chemistry is going to be when they arrive. Is it going to work? And all of a sudden my anxiety throws me off.
Kicks in.
Yeah, it's awful.
It does the same thing as a sub, especially someone who, like myself, is into pain play. I'm very lucky that I'm very cautious about who I play with. I was never really one of those people who mixed kink with drugs. Especially
anything that 9 years ago, thank you.
Especially especially anything that involved being restrained, anything that involved pain, because again, I have a bit of a trauma background as well, so trust issues came into that a fair bit. I'm a sexual assault survivor, so all of that kind of comes up, and it's been that got me into drugs in the first place. That, you know, the trust in people just being completely shattered, and I'm like, well, yeah, fuck it, what have I got to lose now? But it's also been that's kind of kept me strong as well. That resilience.
I think we develop, at least with trauma, we develop coping mechanisms or defenses, or
whether they're healthy or not is another matter. But
I was about to get onto that. It's not necessarily a healthy thing. It can be both ways.
Exactly.
But yeah, that is I just, you telling me that, it just gets me a little bit emotional, and it's like that's horrible, and I get, like, if you're a survivor of that and you're into sadism, it's such a balance. Where does it get from like pain play to all of a sudden abuse? You have to also, your mind has to be with it as well. Yeah,
there have been a couple of moments which have been triggering. I was doing a blade play scene with my partner, and everything was fine up until the point where the knife ended up around my neck.
Yeah.
And because that has actually occurred to me in a sexual violence scenario, that threw me completely out of subspace, and we had to shut the scene down and move into aftercare. And but I appreciate that I have a dom who has that care and that experience to be able to recognize the signs.
Yeah. Well, that is a good dom, realizing, okay, we've stepped on something that probably needs a bit of tender love and care, and then when you're ready.
But up until then, it was really freaking hot.
Oh, don't get me wrong. It's like I definitely have those type of play scenarios in my head as well. But I get it. You get to a point where you've experienced something and it just triggers something, and you don't. Sometimes you know where it comes from, and sometimes
you don't. I've been triggered by scent before. Like, I've smelled something. There was a particular cologne that just completely makes me go completely anxious. Like, I can't smell it. Yeah, for the most part, just completely lost that sentence. I'm sorry.
No. And I am aware of this is a very sensitive subject, and don't share anything you're not comfortable with.
No.
And it's a tricky thing to talk about. So
I wasn't quite
comfortable to talk.
I wasn't quite expecting it to get this heavy this early in the piece.
Well, that's the thing. It's a very loose format, and we can kind of go where we want to go. If you want to shy a little bit away from it, you're more than welcome to maybe change the theme a little bit. That's okay.
We should probably lighten it up at some point.
Oh, absolutely. It is like, of course, we can change the theme a little bit. It is our hour. We just kind of have to see where it goes. But it's it's the first time it's been brought up on this series, stuff like that, especially about sexual abuse. And it is like, especially on the druggy scene, because your consent, that's the word of the day, consent.
Consent.
Because consent is sexy. And I've definitely put myself in situations where I've been so high I wasn't there, so I wasn't able to say yes or no to anything. So, and that is very dangerous when you play with drugs, and you kind of have to realize that.
Definitely. I think, though, they reached a point, particularly for me personally, and I can't speak to everybody's experience, but for me, that escapism became a requirement.
Yeah.
That I was so self-loathing that it was the only thing that gave me the confidence to be able to engage.
Yeah.
And it's really weird because I did lead very much a double life. Like I had my normal group of friends who I would go out bars with and all of that kind of stuff, and then I had my using circle where and never the twain shall meet. But it was in my using circle that I guess I needed to take myself like out of myself, and I felt so badly about myself in those years because if something happens to you when you're treated like trash, you start to believe it.
Yeah.
And because it had happened on multiple occasions, it became.
It's. I'm at the moment. Well, a couple of episodes back, someone mentioned a book called Lust, Men, and Meth. I'm reading that book at the moment.
You're reading that at the moment. I saw you post that one.
It is absolutely amazing, and one of the things is when you get into this spiral of abuse and so on, it becomes about. I'm going to quote the book right now. It becomes about it becomes a part of your sexual script, and all of a sudden it's an integrated part of it. You don't necessarily like it, but it also becomes part of something that needs to help you to get off, and it's not necessarily healthy, and you kind of have to break out of that as well, and it just becomes something you believe, and all of a sudden it's a part of you. But I'm so glad you came out of that, and also I commend your boyfriend, or is it boyfriend or master? What do you refer to him as?
Boyfriend and sir.
Boyfriend and sir. I commend him because he knew how to read you and also take you out of a play setting where it was like, okay, this is not good for him. Let's just move it on. So I will also move this conversation on a little bit because I can see you're a little bit uncomfortable with it. I want you to be comfortable with what we're talking about. How did you meet your boyfriend?
So we connected online through Facebook, not an app. Wow. He was a friend. He was the then partner of a mutual friend. We actually met for the first time in person at Mardi Gras last year. I was living in Melbourne at the time. He was living in Brisbane. And we became really good friends. And we talk all the time. And when I needed to do a geographical change and move out of Melbourne, I touched base with him, and I'm like, would you mind if I came and stayed with you for a few weeks while I get myself sorted? So, like the lesbians, we were. I moved in with everything I owned and just never left.
And how does he feel about that?
Look, I was actually in the process of looking for a place. I'd actually almost found one. And then we had the discussion, and it was like, well, actually, he didn't want me to leave, so I didn't. And yeah, it's been, what, 9 months now?
And you haven't killed each other yet, so that's it.
Not yet. There's been a couple of attempts. No. No, look, this early in recovery, there is carnage.
Yeah.
As I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD. I am on low dose antidepressants at the moment. So pulling apart all of the damage that has been done and rediscovering that connection with a clear head has been quite a journey. Sex is amazing.
That's good. That's good. Sex is healthy.
Look, it's really funny. Like, there's nothing that can be done in 24 hours on drugs that can't be done in 3 hours with a clear head.
Yep, I fully agree with you, because it's all of a sudden it becomes more about quality than quantity. Where on drugs it's much more about quantity.
24 hours of mediocre sex and staring at my phone, or
the phone got more action than me.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah, you touch the phone much more than
we've all gotten stuck in the app loop.
Yeah, yeah. So it's as you mentioned, like early recovery, it's a bit of carnage especially when you go into a relationship. You know how you probably have heard this before: don't date in early recovery, and so on.
Yes, but because I don't like doing things the easy way.
I'm very much like, if it happens, it happens, and then you work with that. I would never say, if you met the right one and they were there, you shouldn't say no. But of course, there has to be boundaries and rules, and also a very transparency about where you're at as a partner.
I guess for me, I'm very lucky in that there was no coming out for me about my situation. Like, he has known every step of the way. He's been there before we started dating to support me. So, you know, he knew what he was signing up for. But around that, not only have I, you know, broken the rule of not dating in the first 12 months, I've entered a polyamory situation.
It's not a rule, it's a suggestion.
Okay, it's a suggestion. They're more like guidelines than actual rules.
Oh, you sound like Pirates of the Caribbean.
That was exactly where I was going. Well done.
There you go. It's very important. Like, it's like realizing a lot of it is guidelines. It's just for anyone watching, this is a little bit more terminology. When you go to a 12-step program, it's very much like first 6 months to a year. You kind of go like, don't date. Some people actually also don't have sex. I personally,
because let's face it, you're an actual train wreck.
Well, that's the thing, and I have been to a meeting where someone explained it very well, kind of why you shouldn't date. You kind of come into the rooms. This is the imagery. We love a little bit of symbolism here. You come into the room, all your plates are broken, and you want to make a stack of plates with your partner, but their plates are also broken. That's why you don't date in recovery with another recovery person. And if you start dating whilst your plates are broken, it's not going to work. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, and I'm really happy it does work for you. And there is, but it's also like, if you go into a relationship, you need to stay clean for you and not for the partner. That is
not for the partner. I've done that before, where I've dropped the drugs for the relationship, and that works up until the day the relationship ends.
Yeah. And
the second it's over, or even like during that, you know, there's drama and there's an excuse to go out there again. I've picked up the day after that relationship's been done and dusted. Yeah,
and that's why it's so important when you go into a relationship, you are so transparent about everything. And that's also one of the things, if I talk to someone and I want to play with them, I'm very transparent about, actually, we can't plan too much because it makes me anxious. And I would rather just meet up and see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. No one loses anything. No one gains anything. And we can just leave it at that. And my mental health is much more important than some random cock somewhere. Well,
very good enough.
It is. My mental health is so much more important now, because I know, as you know, it comes in swings and roundabouts. It's
exactly. I've had to close scenes down because the headspace has just changed. It doesn't require an explanation. Something can happen. You might not be able to pinpoint exactly what it is, but if during that play suddenly you're no longer comfortable, there's no point in pushing through because it's just going to. It's not going to be fun for anyone.
Well, when I was still using and when I was still drinking, I would be in a club setting or a pub setting, and I would be so uncomfortable. But to fix that problem, I would just drink more or take more drugs.
Drink more and take more drugs.
Through to get away from those emotions. Now I'm just like, well, fuck this. I was about to say I'm too old for this shit, so I'll just go home if my head is not there.
And it's great because it's so much cheaper.
Actually, no, non-alcoholic drinks are not cheaper, but going home is definitely cheaper, yes.
Going home is definitely cheaper. And having that confidence to go, you know what, I've had a really good night. I've had enough now. I'm going home. That's actually really empowering rather than pushing on through till stumps because, you know, that's what you think that you have to do. Yeah. There's nothing that says that you actually have to be out until dawn to consider it a good time.
No, it's funny when I look back at my 20s, I would like the anticipation of going out would build during the week, and it was just like, oh, I'm gonna go out and have a good time, and you get out there, and if you're not having a good time, you're just trying to push through to make yourself have a good time. Now I'm like,
but if you're living your life for Friday night, you're missing the rest of that week.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it sounds so cheesy, but you kind of forget to look at the sky and things around you because you're much more focused on that Saturday where you're gonna go out and club with your friends. Where I've had situations where I've been engaged with having to go to an event, I had bought my ticket and so on, and I get to the day and my head is not there. I'm not feeling mentally great that day. I'd rather sell the ticket on to someone who will have a great time than me going and having a mediocre time.
Definitely.
So in Brisbane, what is the scene there? And we can also revert a little bit back to you moving from Melbourne to Brisbane as well. But how is Brisbane as a scene there?
The Brisbane scene is so friendly. It's amazing. So there's no permanent leather bar. So they have Bootco, which is the local leather organisation, run a monthly pub night. Everybody gets geared up. It's very fun and very sexy. There's also Queensland Pups and Handlers. So they run monthly events. It's all like the landscape's all changed at the moment because of COVID, obviously, but so at the moment although we can go out, there's no, like, you have to be seated if you're, so there's no dancing. So, you know, those leather nights have turned into sit-down dinners, which is really, really lovely. So you get like
most leather men love a 3-course dinner and a candlelight supper.
Oh yes. Actually, last year, a dear friend of mine ran a fundraiser, and it was held in this beautiful high tea venue. So you've got like this beautiful Victorian furniture and all of these people dressed like in high cow. It was fabulous, absolutely fabulous.
Oh, do you know what? There's like in Manchester, there's Richmond's tea rooms, which is also very like little finger up and tea and
definitely,
and so on. And I would love to host one of my sober events there. That would just like I do you know, I love mixing leather with camp and with something that's not expected of leather. But to be honest, most gay men would love it anyway.
Oh yeah.
Come on, it's how many times have we not stood in a leather bar and the two most butch guys in the room stand at the bar talking about the latest recipe they just tried out.
I was just about to say, swapping scone recipes.
Yeah, Maggie Beer recipe books. See, I know a little bit of Australia. I did my research. No, I just watched a catering program. That's what I did.
Oh my god! If you do have a chance, check out the catering show.
Sorry, the catering show. I said the name wrong.
You've watched that?
Oh,
okay,
actually,
yes.
why do you think I know Maggie Beer? I wouldn't know who Maggie Beer was unless I watched the program. So you moved from Melbourne to Brisbane, and I know a lot of people, when they get into trouble, they do move location. Sometimes it
and they bring all of their crap with them.
That's the thing. It comes with you in the suitcase. So if you look at Melbourne, I'm not going to judge any city being worse than another, but how do you feel like Melbourne compared to Brisbane, especially when it comes to like the drug scene? Is it worse, better? Is it kind of the same?
I don't know, because I am not in the drug scene in Brisbane at all. I had a slip in January, and just to show how easy it is, 6 messages on Scruff. That's all it took.
Yeah.
Yeah, the apps are a minefield, but you really start to learn what to look out for. Like, the block button for me has never had more of a workout.
I'm talking about that. I have actually contacted Grindr and Scruff and said, you need to make the block button non-payable, because they block you at a certain amount of blocks, and all of a sudden you have 3 profiles you kind of want to get rid of, but you can't because you're not paying.
It's really funny, like, how subtle some of the ways in which people try to indicate that they're into PNP. I didn't realize that wired could be spelled so many different ways. But it's getting really insidious now. Like, I've noticed this trend now for posting cloudy sky pictures.
Cloudy sky pictures?
Yeah, so it's just like sky photos with clouds, and that's, you know, one of the indicators of, yeah.
Wow. Okay. That one here. I talked to a guy on Grindr a couple of months back, and he was trying to make a trend of, if you put the emoji apple at the end of your profile name, that means you're not into drugs.
Yes, so there is actually a really great website called redappleemoji.com, which goes into detail about that. And yeah, it's about
the same guy, I think. Yeah, I talked to him, and it's a great way of doing that. It just hasn't quite picked up. I've seen a couple of
so I use that, but I also, in my actual profile, I put clean and serene, and in brackets, no drugs, followed by literacy is hot, because you would have no idea the amount, like, even spelling it out like that, the number of people who just send me, like, straight off the bat, like, you know, PNP question mark. I'm like, do you not even look at the profile?
No. Are you surprised? It's
oh God, no.
It's because you're in that headspace. You're much more focused on the visual than the text, and in most cases I just kind of either block or just go, no, that's not me. Try reading my profile, and sometimes I hope, when, especially on my Scruff, because I refer to my articles and stuff like that, I have had people, like, they refer to my profile and start reading it, and they read my articles, and they do come back with some comments on that, even if they're in it. Which is important. You can talk to someone who's still in it, but may trigger something down the line with me being open about it.
Yeah, look, if people ask me questions about it, I will be open. I've had conversations with people where you find yourself interested in someone, and then halfway through the conversation they'll bring it up.
Yeah.
And then there's that, especially if the conversation has flowed really well and your interest has peaked, and then they throw that in there, and you're like,
because then in most cases I will scale it back and say, let's just rethink this conversation. Okay, you've just brought this into the conversation. We're not going to have sex now. That is very clear. But let's explore this, and I'll give you the information, my experience, and we can talk about this, because it's clear to me that you've engaged in this conversation to talk about it, not necessarily to have sex with me, because that's off the table off the bat.
Well, it's really interesting, because there have been those instances where it has been brought up, and then I've come back and gone, well, no, sorry, this is not my lifestyle anymore. And then that conversation actually kicks off, and maybe there are people who are trying to find an out.
Yeah.
And maybe engaging with people who are also sober might show them another option. And I guess that's what that whole visibility thing is that a lot of people get dragged into it because they think there's no other way. Like, once they're caught in that cycle, they don't know how to dig themselves out. So they need people to be able to go, it's possible. And I guess that's why, 12-step programs and things like that are so important.
Absolutely. It's so important to kind of find what works for you and which journey you're on, and I'm so happy you found my group and that has helped you, because I knew you could. I've told you from the start, I knew you could. Anyone can if and yes, there's going to be trips and lapses and relapses and so on. Of course, I'm not giving you a free pass by saying that, but it's so important. It's so much more about how do you pick yourself up afterwards. It's what do you learn from that situation. If you don't learn a lot that time around, fine, that's not necessarily an issue. It's just about how do you tackle it. It's your reaction that's the important bit. What is your reaction afterwards? Are you going to just follow down the rabbit hole, or are you going to pick yourself up, try to reassemble your, what do you call it? What was the word? English, not my first language, so I sometimes lose words. Your pride. You have to pick up your pride again. You lose a little bit of your, like, you have to be really like, just own it and just like, I fucked up, fine.
Well, somebody said something to me recently that really stuck, and it was around, you can have recovery or you can have dignity, but you can't have both.
Yes.
You kind of have to swallow your pride a little bit and just be, okay, I've screwed up and do the next right thing. For my slip in January, the biggest takeaway I got from that is that you pick the crap from your addiction picks up right where you left off. There's no, it doesn't go back to being great. There's no reset on having fun with it. I guess too, one of the biggest mistakes that the addict will make when going out there and using again is that they will use at the same level that they did when they were and that was my mistake.
But I also like I
can still take that. That's fine.
I've even shared about it, and I've kind of gone this like, recovery has ruined my using. Because you can't really all of a sudden you have a taste what life can be without, and all of a sudden when you go back to it, you just realize how shit it was. And there's no
sex for me is
no going back. It's just wait.
Sex for me has never been better. It might not be as often, and it certainly doesn't go for as long, but it's fantastic. But I guess also being in a power exchange dynamic, for me, it's the non-sexual things that I find the most value in. It's those little rituals and those protocols that really enhance that connection. So, for example, Sir and I have a thing where we actually read the Just for Today. He's not in recovery, but we read the Just for Today every morning over our morning coffee, and that sets our day. And we will apply the reading to things that are going on for us, elements of our relationship, and we're both getting something from it, which I think is great. I've often thought that the program is for everybody, not just for the addict.
There's lots of tools you can use and I definitely have talked to people who either suffer with mental health and who are not necessarily addicts, but just don't have some of the tools you do get taught either in recovery or doing therapy or all sorts of things you can do to help your mental health, and a lot of people
also helping
engage with their mental health in that way.
But it even helps with my social awkwardness. Like I'm not that. I get crowd anxiety if I'm in a room with too many people and I'm picking up on too many energies. I go a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm the same. Believe it or not, I am exactly there with you. Crowds, if it's a group of my own friends and I know them, I'm very comfortable. If there's just one of my friends and it's all people I don't know, I get very awkward.
Very awkward, yeah.
So I can relay confidence on this, and I'm now I've kind of done it a couple of times. It's what I portray on here, but it's not necessarily who I am in real life and how I navigate in a social setting. It's a very different Ralph you will meet there. Absolutely.
Well, I hope to be able to do that one day.
Absolutely. Well, the Corona allowing.
Once she fucks off.
Yeah. So you mentioned your blog. What was your blog about before? Now you're kind of thinking about revamping it a little bit to fit in your lifestyle.
Yeah, so I've done a complete rebrand. I'm currently in the process of rejigging the website. Previously, it was called Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, and it was a little bit of a hodgepodge of stuff that it was just things that struck me that made me go, you know, what the fuck. So I wrote on everything from colouring to there was a documentary called The Red Pill about men's rights activists, just all different subjects, but I wanted to strip it back and focus on one particular or two, which I guess is the parallel journey of somebody who is, I guess my kink journey's kind of restarted.
Yeah.
Now that I'm in recovery, and my actual recovery itself, and actually be able to talk to both of those things, and be able to document, I guess, in a sense, that journey, and hopefully somebody else can get something from it, but also just start I guess an Australian-based community of sober kinksters and see what comes of it.
It's so
because it's all about networking and connecting people, places, and things, and just I guess being in recovery as well, in the rooms in particular, sex is a bit of a taboo topic. We only have one meeting in Brisbane, which specifically it's nicknamed the taboo meeting because we're able to talk about those things that we can't talk about in other meetings. And you know, I get a little giggle to myself because whenever somebody mentions taboo on an app, it usually means that they're into incest or something. But yeah, sex and relationships are one of those topics that are discussed in a lot more detail at that particular meeting, but it's not really discussed a lot within the addict community, I guess because sex is so heavily linked to people's addiction and can actually be an addiction in itself. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people find sex really, really triggering. I feel privileged in that that's not the case for me. And so I am able to openly discuss that. I don't have a problem talking about sex. I love talking about sex. People probably wish that I didn't talk about it so much.
Do you know what? It's. I think it's also about building new pathways and connections in your brain. About it, it's just to use a medical term, it's the plasticity of your brain. It's
yeah.
That is a really hard word to say. But it because in your brain, especially when you have fetish that's connected to drugs, which was my case, I'm glad that's not your case because it is a fucking pain to split them. It took me almost 2 years of doing that. And it's those pathways. It's like let's do some symbolism here. If you're used to walking one path, that's the path you're going to walk. It's just what you do. So that means every time I put leather on, every time I smelled rubber, my brain was just go drugs, and that was it what it was doing. I had periods where I did not like going in my kink closet because it just felt like a burden. And it's a horrible feeling to have when I had fetish before drugs. I'm like you. I had fetish before I engaged with drugs. I engaged with fetish when I was 22. I didn't start doing drugs before maybe I was 24. So I experienced quite a few things of fetish before I engaged with drug taking. So it was such a pain for me. It was such a grief that I couldn't engage with something I loved so much. So I'm really happy that's not your journey, and you haven't had that experience, because it's a pain to split it. But it is possible. It just takes time. Time and patience.
Yeah, for me, it's more around the psychology of trauma.
Yeah.
Because drugs for me have been the thing that I guess has been masking the trauma side of things. It's the trust and that kind of thing, which is the issue for me. I sometimes feel like I'm experiencing the psychosis without the drugs.
Did you know what? It's like with, I don't know what your drug of choice was, but I know with meth it can.
I'm a cliche, let's put it that way.
Sorry?
I hate to be a cliche, but it was definitely meth.
Fair enough. Well, I didn't want you. It was up to you what you wanted to share there. But it does take.
I mean, I've never been a drug I didn't like.
Me neither, to be honest. And it's for it to get out of your system 100%. It's almost a year and a half before it's completely out. Not a lot of people know that, and that's where like psychosis is a big thing, because that can stick around for a long time. I still, even from now, and I'm getting up to 3 years next month, I still have, thank you. I still have some triggers where I do this. It's like if something's behind me, or I look in a doorway, because mine was paranoia. And I recognize some of those traits still sits in me a little bit. Not much.
What was the joke that Matthew told last week about, why did tweakers do a doggy style?
Yeah, it's like
they could peek out the window.
I'm literally sitting at the window I used to look out at, because I would always be paranoid, because it's just so it's an interesting.
For me, it was hearing messages in song lyrics.
Oh, I used to hear Rihanna music over where there wasn't any, which is a weird one. She must have made an impact on me. I don't know.
Yeah, see, for me, weirdly, it was Nicki Minaj, and I don't know why, because for the most part, I can't stand her music.
I'm so excited for you to do this blog, and it's so important, because, as you say, it's not necessarily about reaching a lot of people. It's just about reaching that one person that needs to hear it. And it's so important. I've had people talk to me where it's like, Ralph, what you wrote kind of put me on that journey, and I needed to go that direction, and it kind of gave me hope. And I was just like, I'm not very good with compliments, but it's really lovely to hear it. And it's so important to me to hear someone go, actually, what you did helped me. And that just makes it worth it. And then I'm just like, I would rather, you know what? Some people are very private about their recovery journey, and that's fine. That's their journey. It's perfectly. Sometimes it's a very private thing. It is a very private thing. It's a very personal.
It is a very private and personal thing. But again, if it comes down to visibility, I had never thought that I could see sober leather people, and your group showed me that, and we have some phenomenal sober title holders who are doing great work.
Well, we even have a Mr. Sober in the States. There is a Mr. Sober title in the States, which is amazing. Yeah. I do know what there's at one point I've actually considered if there should be a Mr. RealClearFetish, but that might be in the future, some way down the line.
Ooh.
I'll just self-appoint myself because I need another sash. Actually, I've seen a couple of messages, and you know what? Thank you for some of the lovely comments. Someone mentioned that they really gives them hope to see some of these interviews, and it's nice that people are watching and getting something out of it, because that is one of the points. And we are actually also coming to the end of our time. The hour goes really quickly.
It just flies by.
So it's so important to have a voice, and I'm glad you are at least a voice in Brisbane or in Australia for a positive force. And I know a couple of sober people in Australia, and it is underrepresented, at least in the public eye, a little bit in Australia. And like, it is a little bit here in Europe as well, where you go to America, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's a big thing.
I hear the stories about meetings at IML and stuff like that. I'm like, yes, that's what we need.
With Matt last week, he was the co-founder of Lore, which is a British thing, and they organize the 12-step meetings at events, at Claw, at IML, and God, I wish I knew about the 12-step meetings when I was at IML last time. It would have been less messy.
Less messy?
But someone said meth, and I followed him. That's fine. It's what happens. But
quite literally, the Pied Piper.
The Pied Piper, yes, yeah. I was definitely the rat sniffing the something. But I'm so excited to see what you put in your blog, and I'm so excited to read it, and when you get to that.
Yes, so hopefully that'll be
for when
over the next month.
Seeing something?
Yes, it'll be like in the next month. So everything's earmarked. I've landed the Facebook page and the Instagram account, so you know everything's kind of set to go. I'm just working on content.
Fantastic. That is amazing, and I'm so happy you're on this journey. And I'm so happy for having you on. Hopefully it hasn't been too traumatic.
No, it has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I feel really humbled to be able to have the chance to be involved. Thank you.
And it's nice to have someone who's recently in early recovery, but also I just get such attention. You're doing well, and you have healthy boundaries, and you have a loving partner who is understanding of you and where you're at, and that's so important, to have someone who also gets you.
The enemy of the addict is isolation, and connection is the key. Absolutely. And the stronger the connections you can build, the more chance you have to stay the path. So yeah, I'm really privileged in that regard.
And I'm happy to be a little part of your path, and I'm so happy for you. I just love your smile. That is the most important thing. So thank you for coming on, and
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
It was an absolute joy to have B on, and it was a very interesting conversation. It was somewhat dark at some parts. I was very happy he was brave enough to share some of that. I really hope everyone got something out of this. I think this episode was kind of dove into some of like PTSD and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very prevalent in drug users. So that's really important. We're coming down to the last 10 seconds. So thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting some of the lovely comments. And I'll see you next week for our 7th episode. We are going to Canada next week, so that should be exciting. So thank you. Bye. Be safe. Bye.